Hey everybody, it's Daniel DeCulse, author of Wavelengths, covering sci-fi in every reality. This was the original edition of the book. It's basically been replaced by the Deluxe Edition. And as you can see, there's a lot more stuff on the cover because there's a lot more stuff inside. For those who don't know, it's 3 alternate histories of science fiction and geek culture, told through parallel versions of the same issue of the same magazine. Of course, depending on what timeline you're in, the contents are totally different. So what I wanted to get into was not so much about the contents per se, but the form of it. Because as I mentioned, the form is told in the articles, the reviews, the editorials, convention reports, interviews, the kind of things that you'd find, in a magazine. And if we flip through inside, each version of reality is referred to as a frequency, and you get the cover of that particular issue. And from that point on, we are in that world. You get to see ads, you get to see news items, let's see, clips from movies, there's a convention report, and so on. So it's not done as a traditional collection of short stories. Usually when I'm first describing the book to people, I'm saying, oh, it's a science fiction book about science fiction. And certainly there have been those in the past. You have collections like Inside the Funhouse and even swashbuckling editor stories. But again, these are collections of science fiction stories. There are characters, she said this, he said that. The same is also true of alternate skiffy, which also is about what-ifs in science fiction. Now, there is one story in here which is all The Spear of the Sun by David Langford, which right from the get-go is telling you that it is a story plucked from an alternate universe. In this case, one where the mystery writer G.K. Chesterton had a science fiction magazine and published it about his interplanetary sleuth, Father Brown. Now, that sort of thing has also been done in the form of, there was Norman Spinrad's The Iron Dream, in which, in some ways, it's a satire of pulp science fiction. And what's intriguing is that once you get past things like the title page, which announces what it is, and there's a dedication, now we get into the book per se, the book that seems like it fell out of an alternate universe, one where Adolf Hitler just dabbled a little in politics, then came to America, where he used his illustration skills to eventually get a job illustrating pulp science fiction magazines until he learned enough English to write some himself. And here we get other science fiction novels by him. There's an About the Author. And then we get into the meat of the book, which is that novel from that alternate universe. And then there's an afterword, which discusses basically the state of the world and the state of science fiction in that world. Sometime later, in the 1980 winter special of Comics Journal. It's actually issue number 53. Dwight R. Decker wrote Stahlmann, the Man of Steel. And it really seems like an historical Comics Journal article, but it's from another universe. It's from a universe in which German cartoonist Adolf Hitler creates a character called Stahlmann, who was rocketed to Earth, specifically Germany, from the planet Arya, which makes him an Aryan, and goes to fight various, well, rather bigoted evils. Basically, it's looking at, Hitler's idea of the Übermensch, and reflecting that against the American Superman, who stood for quite different values. Over here, we've got Bob Rozakis's The Secret History of AA Comics. And again, this is a full book that seems to have fallen out of another universe. This is a universe in which, back in the 40s, things went a little differently for DC Comics. Basically, in this universe, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, together with Bob Kane, win more control over their characters, Superman and Batman, respectively, much to the consternation of DC, which at that time was actually split between one side of the company that published their adventures and now has to share them with Siegel and Shuster and Kane, who are forming another company to do the same thing, and all their other Golden Age characters, the original Green Lantern, the original Flash, Wonder Woman, and so on. And so it's Superman and Batman that have to get revamped, in the 60s. Like I said, right from the get-go, it's being told from the point of view of a different universe. And it takes you from the Golden Age, and he's, Bob Rozakis got artists to recreate covers with a very, very different slant involving different characters, all the way up to modern times. And it's only in the back of the book that we start to get some additional material in which he discusses where the idea for this came from, and a proposal that that had been made early on in the process. And from Obverse Books in the UK, we have an entire series. And mind you, this entire series, what I've got here, this is only the second half of the series, which I've got, here in print. The first half is in, I have in ebook form. I think right now you can probably get all of them in ebook form. But this is an entire series of Doctor Who novelizations, quote unquote, in a universe where Peter Cushing, who had only made two Doctor Who movies that had a very different take, on the Doctor and his companions. But what if events conspired so that he kept making them more and more and more over the years, and even also a radio series during those years when he wasn't making films. And goes right up to the last one, The Six Doctors, which is for the big anniversary. Anyway, so it was some of this that was kind of floating around in my head when it came to creating Wavelengths, because I didn't want to do like a story where it was kind of forced and awkward to bring in a lot of the elements. Because yes, there would be the premise for each universe. There's a universe in which George Lucas does not have a big success with Star Wars and winds up going into horror movies. There's a universe where Tom Cruise had made a really successful series of John Carter of Mars movies back in the 90s, and that kicked off a whole Sword and Planet and steampunk craze that has gone unabated. And there's a universe where all the pilots and things in development that Gene Roddenberry had in the 70s all worked out. He was so busy with them that he didn't bother trying to bring back Star Trek. But for every change, and I'm big on the butterfly effects, for every change, there's something that affects something that affects something that affects something else. And how was I going to cover everything? Well, I wound up falling back on my own involvement with Starlog magazine. I mean, for years I had read it, and then for a number of years I worked on the editorial staff, and then later on I returned as a freelancer. And let's see, this is one of my early pieces. You can see, right there. An interview with Grace Lee with me. That was actually one of the first articles I wrote for the magazine, but it kept on getting pushed back and back and back until this one. Anyway, that struck me as a way I could legitimately cover all these different things, all these different directions, because that's what a magazine does. It covers a lot of different things. But there are a lot of different things in each universe. So there are things that I get to talk about directly in the articles. There are things that I get to talk to on the side with other production, news items, reviews. There's letters pages. Well, we just happened to turn to it, where we get into seeing what fans in that universe are writing in about. So that's what's going on. Like I said, each section of the book is called a frequency. That frequency is that particular alternate universe. If you pick up the book, you want to read everything that is a part of that frequency before moving on to the next one. Don't just jump around. You'll miss stuff. Anyway, I hope to do some more of these in the future, talking about certain specific things, because there's a lot that I get into, like I mentioned Phoenix 5. As I mentioned, there's some of the Gene Roddenberry stuff that people may or may not be familiar with, such as Genesis 2 and Planet Earth. There's a cover article there on a mini-series based on being filmed in one universe based on Gulliver Jones. There's a whole video that we shot and still have to edit, all about just who Gulliver Jones is. And like I said, hope to be bringing you more stuff in the future. So, Wavelengths, covering sci-fi in every reality, the Deluxe Edition, that's the one that you want, by Daniel A. Dickholtz, that's me. It's on sale via Amazon and other online retailers. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.